Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Geezerology. I'm Scott, coming to you from South Florida. Today, I'm going to start a little occasional series called 50 and Forgotten. Basically, these are albums that I want to talk about that are 50 years old, celebrating their 50th anniversary, but they're being celebrated quietly. In fact, many of them silently. These are albums that haven't gotten a whole lot of attention in the last 40 plus years, but still they're 50 years old, and they're albums that I've listened to back in the day when I was a kid, and I have fond memories of them, and I just wanted to go ahead and touch on these. Today I'm going to talk about the Steppenwolf album For Ladies Only, which was released in November 1971. We're not sure the exact date of this release, but we do know it was released in November 1971, 50 years ago this month. This was produced by Richard PODOLOR. I think that's how you say his name, Richard PODOLOR. He was a guy who was fairly active in the early 1970s. He was mostly produced Three Dog Night. He did some work back in the early 70s with Iron Butterfly and others, and he continued to work as a producer over the years with some occasional credits in the late 90s. For Steppenwolf, this was their second studio album that PODOLOR produced. He also produced Steppenwolf 7, which came out a year earlier in 1970. And PODOLOR also produced two greatest hits compilations for the band that were released in 1970 and 1973. This was Steppenwolf's sixth studio album. It was the final one before they disbanded in 1972. So this one is most notable now for being the final album released by the original version of Steppenwolf. Now, John Kay, a couple years after this, did reform the band with a couple of the original members, and he's been recording and touring with some version of a band called Steppenwolf pretty much ever since then. But this is a final album of Steppenwolf when they were still a viable band. They were at this time they were trying different things. They were drifting a little bit away from what made them so successful in the years previous to this. But this was still this still followed the linear course of the band until they disbanded. The lineup on this includes three of the founding members of Steppenwolf: John Kay, keyboard player Goldie McJohn, and drummer Jerry Edmonton. Bass was played by George Biondo, who was also by this time the second lead singer of Steppenwolf. This is the second album after Steppenwolf 7 that Biondo appeared on. And this is the only Steppenwolf album that featured lead guitarist Kent Henry. He was formerly with a band called the Blues Image that was kind of known as a one-hit wonder. They had a hit called Ride, Captain Ride a year or two before this. And PODOLOR produced the album. And then when the band broke up, and they lost a previous guitar player, Larry Byram, who left. So PODOLOR brought Kent Henry into the band to play guitar, and he went on to play a couple of John Kay solo albums in the intervening years, but he never again appeared on a Steppenwolf album. This album, For Ladies Only, there's the cover there. You've probably seen that cover. There's the back cover, which is a picture of the band. And probably in 2021, For Ladies Only is probably best remembered for this gatefold photo. I don't know if you remember that, but that thing right there with that nasty picture there. Of that, we used to call it the penis mobile. I tried to track that down, trying to figure out what that was, and there actually been a few internet posts about this car, and actually a few more photos of it. Supposedly that was a car that somebody in LA built for to run in a gay pride parade. And somehow some photographer saw it there and took a picture of it. I don't know if Steppenwolf saw it and ordered the picture taken, or if somebody just presented this photo to Steppenwolf and they decided to use it. I have no idea. But anyway, that's probably, if you hear anybody talk about the album for ladies only these days, that's probably what is being discussed, is that photo in the gatefold. Yeah, this was not Steppenwolf at its best. This basically, by this time, you can tell by listening to this album and reading the credits on this album that John Kay was bored with them at this point, was probably bored with Steppenwolf at this time, or he just had a creative rut or whatever, running out of ideas. But Kay doesn't write, but he writes one song on this album. He's a co-writer on a couple of songs, but he mostly, he was the main songwriter for the first few Steppenwolf albums, but by this time he wasn't writing much at all. And in fact, he had given up a lot of the vocal duties to Biondo, who sings lead on 3 or 4 of the tracks on this album. It's a 10-track album. So there's a good chunk of this album that John Kay isn't even around for this. So it's become more of an ensemble album, and probably because Kay has kind of backed off and drifted away from him a little bit, there's a strange credit on the liner notes on this album. It's called Album Concept by Jerry Edmonton, who is the drummer of the band. I'm not sure what that means, but the only thing, this, as far as I can tell, the only concept on this album is it has something to do with, it's some sort of reaction to maybe to the feminist movement, which was pretty prominent at the time in the early 70s, around the turn of the decade. And but I can't tell if this was just a really bad take on the feminist movement by Steppenwolf, if they didn't really understand what it was all about. It very well could be that they were trolling the feminist movement. I can't really tell, and I really don't remember reading much about this back in the day. But that picture of that car, and then a few of the songs in here, the subject matter of a few of these songs, it's more misogynistic than it's feminist, to be honest with you. But I don't know if that's because they just didn't understand, or if they were trolling. I don't know, but it does run through this album, and even from the title. And if that's the album concept that Jerry Edmonton is credited with, well, okay, I wouldn't be so proud of that credit if I were him. This album did okay commercially. It reached number 54 on the Billboard 200 album charts, which is a pretty good showing for most albums. It certainly wasn't the heights that they had gotten previously with their earlier albums. Steppenwolf preceded this album with a couple of singles. Ride With Me was released in July 1971, and an edited version of the title track for Ladies Only was released in October, about a month before the release of this album. None of those singles did much. I don't think either one of them even got close to the top 40. I remember hearing them on the radio back in the day. They got some radio play, but yeah, for Ladies Only got to number 64. Ride With Me only got to number 52. And this album, when it did come out and we first heard it, it's obvious that Steppenwolf was drifting away from what they'd been doing before. They were getting far away from the hard rock, leather-clad biker anthems that they were known for in the early days, and they were actually drifting into a little bit of experimentation. They were trying on a few different styles. Some of it was successful, some of it missed. But overall, I thought it was a pretty good album, an enjoyable album, especially if you're a Steppenwolf fan. It doesn't disappoint if you're a hardcore Steppenwolf fan, not like a lot of the stuff that came after. But this was still to me a viable Steppenwolf album. The first track is the centerpiece of this album. It's the title track for Ladies Only, and it clocks in at a little over 9 minutes. This was written by Edmonton, Henry, Kay, and McJohn. Basically what this is, if you heard the single that came out in October, this is that single where the first half of the single opens the track. The latter part of the single closes the track. In between, it's about a 6 or 7 minute instrumental piece that basically is built around a Goldie McJohn piano run, and it's pretty good. It works pretty well, but it's obviously Steppenwolf's attempt at jumping on the prog bandwagon, and it wasn't horrible. It was fine. It just wasn't up to snuff with what other people were doing. Like, yes, with Roundabout, yes, had Roundabout earlier in the year where it was a hit single surrounding a big long instrumental track, and that's obviously what Steppenwolf was striving for here, and it was okay. The second track, I'm Asking, is a Edmonton McJohn composition, and this one is the first lead vocal on the album by George Biondo, and it's just a mid-tempo rocker. It's a nice counterpoint to hearing John Kay, which goes throughout the album. I like Biondo's voice. Biondo had a good voice, and it serves him well here, and I thought it served the band well here on this album. He did a good job. Side one closes out with tracks 3 and 4, Shackles and Chains, written by John Kay, the only song that Kay wrote exclusively. And it closes with a Mars Bonfire tune called Tenderness. Now, Mars Bonfire was Jerry Edmonton's brother. Mars Bonfire was his professional name. His name was Dennis Edmonton. He was Jerry Edmonton's brother. Anyway, Shackles and Chains and Tenderness are heavily country influenced tunes. It sounds like Steppenwolf just trying on some country rock for size, which they had done on a few tracks in the past, but they really dive in head first on these 2 tracks. They're pretty good, not bad. Side 2 opens with another Mars Bonfire tune called The Night Times For You. And this is a pretty standard Steppenwolf psychedelic 3-minute rock tune that we heard many of these from the early days. So they're just showing here that they could still do that. Side 2, the second track, is a Jerry Edmonton written tune called Jaded Strumpet. This is actually my favorite track in this album. It's a burner sung by Biondo, and he's singing about a girl that obviously the band all knew, that she was the kind of girl who would treat you right if you treat her right, if you know what I mean. Not a whole lot of feminist sentiment going on here. The third track on side 2, written by George Biondo and John Kay, is called Sparkle Eyes, and this is a slower number sung by Kay with a fairly long instrumental break in the middle of it that gives the guitar player Kent Henry a chance to shine for a couple minutes during a long instrumental bridge in the middle of it. Track 4, Kent Henry also is a star of this one. It's Black Pit. It's about a 3.5-minute instrumental written by Kent Henry and McJohn. Henry plays lead guitar, McJohn plays Hammond organ, and and they bounce off each other pretty well. Just a nice little instrumental break. The fifth track on side 2 is a Mars Bonfire tune called Ride With Me. This was the single that they led off with in July '71. This is just a revisit of the old Steppenwolf style, trying to recreate their formula for a hit single. It doesn't stack up to their earlier hits, but it's your typical just Steppenwolf rocker. And the album closes with the George Biondo written In Hopes of a Garden. Biondo sings this little pastoral tune. There's no drums here. There's just McJohn playing the organ and Kent Henry playing an acoustic guitar, and it's just a nice little 2-minute closer. Rather quiet, rather pastoral, and gives us all some peace of mind. This is a pretty good album. I can understand why this album isn't remembered much. It's just kind of disappeared. It's not anything outstanding. There are some good moments on it. There are some moments on here that are obviously just filler, and they're just going through the paces to get an album out. But there are enough highlights on this album, I think, that it's worth a listen to, especially if you're a Steppenwolf fan from way back, and if you've never heard it, give it a shot. You'll find some things to like about this. That's my take on For Ladies Only. Join us again when Bob and Dee will be back to join me for a panel discussion on our Wednesday spotlight. We'll be back on Friday with somebody will have a review for you on our Freeform Friday. And I'll check back in with another 50 and Forgotten album sometime in the next couple of weeks. So thanks for listening, everybody. So long.